word didn't become or start in the Amy that is used in John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word. The Word didn't become or start in the beginning in John 1:1. The Word was in continual existence in the beginning. The Word was. And that's what we have here. And the earth was, not became. And so the Septuagint translators thoroughly understood and expressed what this was and how they took it. It is not as become. It was.
I was listening to Biblical Studies and Reviews, I think. He was interviewing a Hebrew scholar or so. And it was about the words. About the words that I couldn't pronounce them in the Greek. I don't know, I think he was like, the main problem I had was that he was comparing it to like the word was, right? To the earth was, saying that like in the context of John, right, it means like it's equivalent to describing the earth or so. But obviously, the word was God and the earth was without form and void, right? Are not really a comparison because we're talking about two different things. Because God being perfect and the world being corruptible, right? So uncreated and created things kind of thing, right? And so I just had a problem with it. And then obviously because, they're obviously criticizing gap creationism. It's been a while since I've, read up on something about gap theory or gap creationism, right? So I tried to, I just put it into the chat, like the stuff that I remember on top of my head. Also remembering some stuff that I read from some commentaries from like one of these Jewish sages. I remember, I think it was Ramban, I think it was. Because I think one of the claims that Young Earth was making was that like like gap creationism is a later invention or something, but it's not. So anyway, addressing the Greek thing. I mean, I'm no scholar or anything, right? But I just felt there was a problem there because he's trying to use it to disprove the idea that the earth became without form and void, and therefore there's no gap, right? No justification. So I'm just trying to justify the gap, right? Using theological coherence, I guess, a coherent theology. Because I don't believe Young Earth Creationism, I don't believe has a coherent theology when you really look at it. And anyway, the LXX Greek argument against the gap. Some Hebrew Greek scholars, often Young Earth Creationist leaning, argue that John 1 analogy, in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God, is continuous existence, eternal, not becoming. Therefore Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And 1:2, the earth was formless and void. It must describe something that was always existed in that state, not a prior creation, destroyed or altered. Conclusion, there cannot be a temporal gap. God created the earth that way from the start. Now, why this argument is weak? Greek grammar does not force the continuous existence. Reading for Genesis 1:2, the LXX translates Genesis 1:2 as, it gives me this Greek that I cannot pronounce. I forgot how this word was said by the scholar we're saying it. It said this word equals was, right? In an imperfect tense. Imperfect in Greek equals action in the past, continuing at a certain point, not eternal or continuous forever. Unlike John 1:1, which uses the same Greek word, right? In a theological, eternal context, Genesis 1:2 is a narrative past, not metaphysical past. So the analogy between John 1:1 and John 1:2 is invalid. They're different context, different function. To God created the earth that way is reading too much into silence. Young Earth Creationists argued that the earth was made formless and void intentionally by God, but the Hebrew does not say that explicitly. It only says the earth was formless and void. Gap theory simply reads the verse as a state, not as a deliberate, permanent creation. The text leaves open that this condition could have been caused by judgment, chaos, or a prior world. We simply don't know from Genesis 1:2 alone. The context of was in Genesis 1:2 always allows change. Unlike John 1:1, Hebrew, I'll try to say it, Ve'eretz hayatu tohu vavahu. Hayata equals was or became. not a statement about eternal metaphysical perfection, just a temporal description of the earth's state. The LXX translation uses N, or how you pronounce that, right, which is grammatically correct but does not impose eternal continuity. The earth's state is subject to God's later action, 1:3 through 31. That's chapter Genesis, right? Yeah. And proving it is not fixed as it first appeared. For the theological issue with Young Earth Creationism, God made it that way, reading, if the earth was intentionally created, tohu, wahu, then God deliberately made darkness, chaos, and a void world before Adam. Young Earth Creationists often call this perfect, but Scripture never calls this good. Young Earth Creationism is forced to say that a chaotic, uninhabitable world is perfect, which contradicts both the text and God's character. Gap theory avoids this. The earth became chaotic due to a prior event, whether it be angelic rebellion or judgment of some kind, right? And God's restorative work in the 6 days brings it to good, the condition of good, right? And the summary gives me a summary. John 1:1, analogy fails. The Greek imperfect. Forgot how to pronounce that. In Genesis, this word in Genesis 1:2 does not imply eternal continuity. 2 created it that way. Reading is an unwarranted assumption. Genesis 1:2 describes a state, not a permanent creation. Textual context, right, number 3, supports restoration. God's creative action in Genesis 1:30-31 transformed the earth, proving it was not fixed in chaos from the start. For theological coherence favors gap. Only the gap allows for prior judgment chaos while still preserving God's goodness and the literal 6-day creation. Now asked me to want to add this, and I said, yeah, so I added it to the finalized generated essay that I was inspired to generate, listening to the parts of the video, right? And so the theological and textual case for gap creationism, why the ancient gap view is strong, and why Young Earth Creationism collapses under its own assumptions. Young Earth Creationism, YEC, insists that Genesis teaches a universe only thousands of years old, that no death existed before Adam, and that the earth began as a perfect, fully formed paradise. But this system requires reinterpretations, assumptions, and theological contradictions that neither the Hebrew text, ancient Jewish interpreters, nor the broader canon support. Gap creationism, the view that Genesis 1:1 describes the absolute beginning, and Genesis 1:2 describes a later ruined state of the earth, that God then reforms, is a far older, more textually grounded, and far more theologically coherent understanding. It preserves the literal 6 days, honors the Hebrew grammar, and fits the interpretive patterns of the earliest Jewish sages. Below is the case. 1, Hebrew grammar allows, it even favors a pre-Adamic gap. Young Earth Creationists often claim that Hebrew grammar disproves the gap. This is untrue. 1:1, Genesis 1:2 is a disjunctive clause, the wow disjunctive. And this is a well-established fact in Hebrew linguistics. A while disjunctive clause does not follow sequentially from the previous verse, provides background information, pauses the narrative. Thus Genesis 1:2 is not day 1 starting, but a description of the earth's condition at some point after the initial creation of 1:1. This alone opens the door to a temporal gap. 1.2, Hayata legitimately means became. Virtually every Hebrew lexicon acknowledges this. It is used that way in many other OT passages. Thus, the earth became formless and void is entirely grammatically legitimate. Gap theory does not force the grammar, it uses established grammar. Young Earth Creationists cannot say the same, as we will see later. The 2 chaotic state of Genesis 1:2 does not match God's character or declarations. Young Earth creation theology requires that God created the earth formless, void, and dark. Yet this original condition was perfect and very good, even though God never says it was good, and repeatedly contrasts his work with chaos. This is internally inconsistent. 2.1, God repeatedly says his works are good, but never calls the tohu bohu state good. God calls the following good: the light, the waters, the land, the vegetation, the luminaries, the animals, mankind. But he never calls the formless void condition good. He only calls the ordered world good. This fits the gap. It contradicts Young Earth Creationism. 2.2. The LT uses formless and void, tohu wabohu, as language of divine judgment, not initial perfection. Jeremiah 4:23. This is devastating. Whenever the phrase appears in the prophets, it refers to divine judgment, ruin, destruction of a previously ordered land. This perfectly fits a ruined pre-Adamic world. It does not fit a perfect original world. 3. The gap was known long before geology among Jewish sages and early theologians. Young Earthers claims that the gap was invented in the 19th century to avoid evolution. This is historically false. 3.1. Jewish sages taught pre-Adamic worlds, cycles, destructions, and prior creations. We're not speaking about fringe mystics, mainstream medieval authorities. Ramban, Nachmanides, Ibn Ezra, Rashi hints at it, Midrash, Rabbah, Zohar, Louis Ginsberg's Legend of the Jews documents the ancient traditions. These sources speak of earlier worlds God made and destroyed, ruins before his creation, chaos preceding ordering, God's spirit hovering over the ruins. This is not modern science accommodation, it is ancient Jewish exegesis. 3.2. Early church theologians held views structurally identical to the gap. Tertullian, Origen, and even Augustine acknowledge pretemporal creations, angelic ages, chaotic states prior to 6 days, restored worlds. Gap creationism is far closer to ancient tradition than Young Earth Creationism. I wish I would have asked for some reinforce of the claims here, right? Specific work citations there, but moving on. Gap theory solves the theological contradictions that Young Earth Creationism creates. Young Earth Creationism collapses under several self-inflicted contradictions. 4.1. Young Earthers must explain, why Satan fell before or during the 6 days. If angels were created on day 1 or day 4, Lucifer fell before Eve was tempted. Then there was sin and death in the universe before Adam sinned. This contradicts Young Earth Creationist claims that no evil existed before day 6. Gap theory solves this cleanly. The angelic realm existed long before Satan's fall occurred, before the 6-day restoration. The chaotic state reflects divine judgment. Young Earth Creationism has no consistent explanation. 4.2. Young Earth Creationists must redefine death in Romans 5:12. Paul says death came through one man. Young Earth Creationists interprets this as no animal or angel died before Adam. But Scripture never says this. Romans 5 is about human death. Death spread to all men. Angels aren't even in view. Genesis 3 already assumes Adam knows what death is before sin. Young Earth Creationists must import a meaning into Romans that Paul never intended. Gap theory reads Paul as Paul intended about humans. 4.3. Young Earth Creationists must call darkness, chaos, void, and deep, watery gloom very good. Yet God does not. Gap theory fits the flow. Genesis 1:2 equals a ruined earth. Genesis 1:3-31. God's reordering, which is called good. Young Earth Creationists must claim good equals not yet good, darkness equals good, formless equals good, void equals good, deep equals good, chaos equals good. This is not exegesis, it is theological gymnastics. 5. Gap theory allows a literal 6 days without forcing any text. Gap creationism does not symbolize or reinterpret the 6 days. It simply recognizes Genesis 1:1 is the absolute beginning. Genesis 1:2 describes the earth in a ruined or incomplete state. Genesis 1:3-31 record 6 literal days of restoring order. This honors the text exactly as written. Young Earth Creationism, ironically, must reinterpret many things: light before the sun, day and night cycles without luminaries, perfect animals that later became predators, pre-flood hydrology systems that contradict geology, instantaneous spatiation after the flood. Gap theory is far more literal and far less forced. Gap theory preserves the integrity of both scripture and the created world. As Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Young Earth Creationism pits scripture versus science, scripture versus geology, scripture versus cosmology, scripture versus internal theological coherence. Gap theory does not compromise scripture. It harmonizes scripture with the Hebrew grammar, ancient Jewish tradition, the observable world, the broader canonical theology, the literal six-day creation week. It is a whole Bible, whole reality model, something Young Earth Creationism cannot offer. And then a conclusion, Gap Creationism is a strong, ancient, and coherent model. Young Earth Creationism is not. Gap theory honors the Hebrew, respects ancient Jewish interpretation, maintains theological coherence, preserves a literal Genesis, explains Lucifer's fall logically, avoids forcing Paul to say what he didn't say, accommodates old earth evidence without compromising scripture, fits the biblical theme of judgment, chaos, and restoration. Meanwhile, Young Earth Creationism conflicts with basic Hebrew, requires God to call chaos very good, cannot logically place Satan's fall, misreads Romans 5 and 1 Corinthians 15, contradicts ancient interpretive tradition, denies observable creation, requires theological gymnastics to harmonize its own claims. Gap Creationism is not perfect or infallible, but it is unmistakably older, richer, more coherent, more biblical, and more intellectually honest than the rigged system of Young Earth Creationism, which from the books that I was reading from a while back, right, on Gap Creationism, they always associate Young Earth Creationism as beginning with with Ellen G. White, Seventh-day Adventist prophetess, right, who prophesied all the literal claims of the Young Earth Creationists, right, that you find in like Henry Morris's book, I think it was, right, if I remember correctly. I forgot, I think it was called Genesis Flood, I don't remember, but it was like a while back, like 15 years ago or so. And so yours is more the recent invention, basically, from a controversial prophetess or so. She's like the Seventh-day Adventist prophet or whatever. But yeah, I'll just stop it there, and that's the generated essay. And then anyway, if you like it, please like and subscribe, and let me know what you think, and God bless.